But in a situation where you find that a person look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, welcome back and thanks for staying with us. If you're just joining us, you're watching Trust TV and this is Daybreak. It's now time for the newspaper review and analysis, and we already have our guest in the studio, and the person is Ali M. Ali, Deputy President, Nigerian Guild of Editors, joining us, to review the papers this morning. Good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Husseina. Good morning, Abdulaziz. It's good to be here.
All right, so okay, it's good to have you. All right, so what we'll be doing today, we'll start with a Daily Trust newspaper. This is what we will be starting off with, and yes, on the lead story today, we have 140 days after federal government loses 3 billion naira on halted Kaduna Abuja train service. We have riders that says, I closed my shop, laid off staff, says restaurateur. Clear terrorist cells to ease resumption, says security experts. And then how disruption will affect loan payment. And then right below that, you have an infograph of, of everything that has actually happened, in that 140 days, that the Kaduna Abuja train service, has been halted. How 3.02 billion naira has been lost. The minimum revenue per trip is 2.7 million naira. Total revenue is 21.6 million naira. And total revenue in 1 week is 151.1 million naira. And total loss in the last 4 months since train services were suspended, is accumulated to about 600 million naira monthly. So if you want to, get an idea of what this particular story says, you feel free to grab a copy of Daily Trust newspaper. We also have more stories. APC Muslim ticket, shun sentiments, vote quality leaders, says Idowu Ferron. You also have 50 killed, many displaced as flood wreaks havoc in Jigawa. Then many terrorists killed in Niger, Kaduna airstrikes as well. These are some of the stories that can be found, in Daily Trust newspaper.
Okay, and let's go to another newspaper, or should we, let's perhaps get your take on some of these stories, Madam Ali. It's been 140 days, the attack of March 28th this year, where terrorists attacked the Abuja-Kaduna train service, abducted many, killed some, and the government subsequently shut down the train service. It has been 140 days that the service has not worked, and you can see the liability. What are your thoughts now that there have been clamor for return of the service, and the government saying there is no security infrastructure in place and all that? What are your thoughts around this?
Well, let me just say the story today is in tradition of the Daily Trust. I think every Monday they have this exclusive story, deep, in-depth. They go out of the routine. And normally Mondays are dry days for virtually all the newspapers. It's one day that you don't buy a newspaper and then you read all the stories. So I think Daily Trust is keeping in that tradition. And in any case, this story is one of these low-hanging fruits. I wonder why it took even the Daily Trust this long to do that kind of a story. Because it has been there literally low-hanging. Just go there, grab it, and it will make an interesting reading, like it engaged my attention all through. So, well, you see that the story captured the amount of losses. The nation is literally hemorrhaging. That is one corridor that it was fetching the government and individuals in the system a lot of money. When I say individuals, we know the amount of ticket racketeering going on in the in the Abuja-Kaduna corridor, the rail service, and with the destruction or with the sabotage that happened on March 28 or thereabout, you see the amount of money be lost. Even that, I think, is merely a tip of the iceberg. These are projected revenue. But in actual revenue, you find out that the government has always been shortchanged. Even on the day of the attack, there are still conflicting, if you go by the manifest, there are still conflicting
Figures,
claims. Yes, figures. So you see, a lot of resources, are being lost to the government, and for a service, for a corridor that was paid for mainly by foreign loan, expected to pay back. When you take loans, loans, no problem with doing that. Every
lender,
precisely, we expect his money to be returned. And it's only because he's investing in something that is viable. And the rail corridor between Abuja and Lagos is a very viable, let me use past tense, was a very viable until when we put it to test, then we look at the leaks, the loopholes, the leakages because of racketeering. One, the government has taken so many steps to check that. But the Nigerian racketeer is 2 steps ahead of government. And sometimes there is clear connivance. This is not different from what's happening in the oil sector. We cited over and over the amount of theft in the oil sector. Only recently, I think a couple of days ago, the Minister of State Petroleum and even the group MD of the newly unveiled NNPC company lamented the amount of oil theft and how much revenue the government is losing because of oil theft. This is no different from oil theft. Now, if you look at also associated, closely associated to the rail, small businesses, like I think it's captured there, restaurateurs, drivers, taxis, other services that drive their livelihood, source of livelihood because of the rain, because there is a value chain there, have been disrupted. And a lot of Nigerians will be pushed into the job market. So really, this is an eye-opener. You can understand why Nigeria is broke. They are similar, well, maybe to a lesser extent. You find replication of this very worrisome losses. Government is losing money, and you can see that bandits, terrorists, insurgents are compelling Nigerians to leave. They have altered our way of life completely. But you can say, perhaps, thumbs up for the government. Of late, it has been on the offensive to flush out and to make Nigerians feel safe. Maybe
that's actually the next question I was actually going to ask, because a writer here talks about, clearing terrorist cells to ease resumption. But do you think Nigerians will be able to trust, the government or even the train services enough, to be able to patronize them, even after all, the terrorist cells have been cleared?
Normally, citizens worldwide rarely trust government because, especially in third world countries, there is always a deep-seated mistrust. And I use this word knowingly, deep-seated, because government in third world countries, because of the nature they are being run, one of the attributes of that you earn trust is transparency and accountability. Most third world countries don't, third world governments rarely do that, especially in Africa. So the question whether Nigerians would trust the rail service or trust the government, especially given the government track record of, if you like, some will say, critics will say, abysmal lack of, record when it comes to security. People will be skeptical whether to trust the government. But you see, Nigerians don't have much alternative. It's either the deep blue sea or the devil, between the rock and a hard place. This is the choice we are confronted with. One would have thought that given the notoriety of the Kaduna, Abuja trunk route, highway, a lot of people will not apply it. Notwithstanding that there have been mountain of security, patrol, the patrols have been intensified. You see all the time. You can't avoid going there unless you are not from the northern part of the country. And you can't, for example, afford to fly. Most people cannot afford to fly. Well, in any case, if you're going to Kaduna, why would you fly to Kano, then drive back to Kaduna? So it's counterproductive. It will be eating deep into your resources. So Nigerians are compelled to ply that route. And unfortunately, because, like I said, you are sandwiched between the rock and hard place, between the devil and the blue sea. So what do? You say your prayers and then you go perhaps some people will say on the journey of no return, literally, because every now and again you hear all these breaches happening all the time. But you must give it to the government of late. Yes, they're trying their best, but the thing is so deep-seated, is so that is not enough to apply the stick. Yeah, you apply the stick, but even to what extent have we applied the stick? There are instances, because see, the crime, the banditry is so deep-seated now, you begin to wonder, because you have insiders, you have family members compromising the security of their family members. We've heard stories of how nephews, cousins,
serve as informants.
Precisely.
Well, that's been really challenging.
So
and,
it's quite challenging.
Exactly.
So whether Nigerians will trust it, we don't have any choice. Yes. We're just waiting for it to come back, and then we go, because it saves us money, and then we've gotten used to some of these things.
Well, that's very interesting thing that you've said. So let's move to another paper. But just before that, there is this story of the Anglican priest, a senior Anglican priest, Ido Ferron, saying that Nigerians should forget sentiments and vote quality leaders. He was reacting to the furor about the Muslim ticket of the APC, and in which he was saying that he's really embarrassed by the debates about all these same faith or different faiths and all that tickets. What's your thoughts about this, especially in the light of recent happenings?
Well, I think I must say that he spoke truly like a man of God, who has a deeper understanding of the problems of Nigeria. Nigeria's problem is not actually religion. It's far more deep-seated, because if you go by it, the segmentation will never end. So, but you see, like I've always said, I have opposed repeatedly on forums like this. I've written about it, about the idea of a same-faith ticket, given our complexity and diversity, and given the fact that people up to this moment, they express their fulfillment or lack of it through faith, and that shouldn't be so, because most of the things, like I think Obasanjo once argued that, look, it's about time we get a man-fearing leader, not a God-fearing leader. What we mean is that let people respect the checks, constitutional provisions, legal provisions, and then you have an egalitarian society. When you have, this is an argument that perhaps I share. So when you say looking at quality, this is the argument the APC put forward. And you look at competence. Really, you look at it, really, what is even that? Competence, capacity, these are, well, subjective terms, if you like, at the level of political leadership. But one of the things I understand should be competent enough, capacity is knowledge. About time we have leadership that is knowledgeable. Singapore and other Asian tigers, and then newly influential state at the turn of the 1980s, 1970s, was basically because of knowledge. And we have what we have now, contemporary times. Knowledge drives economy, knowledge-driven economy. We've got moved past the state of where Abdulaziz knows Ali, Ali knows Husseina, and then you get somewhere. No, it's what you know now. It's not so much who you know, but what you know. So if that argument, going by his argument, for competence, then you look at what are the options. But are Nigerians even knowledgeable enough? Not people like you and I here in the studio, relatively informed. The people at the bottom of the social ladder who are diseased, ignorant, the only thing they know is religious and cultural solidarity, identification. You understand? Up to this moment, we practice the politics of identity. That identity could be cultural, could be religious, and more often than not, we've seen it instances. But you see, like we said, if you go in both the major language and even animist, there are also sects. How do you reconcile that? But like I always say, if the shoe is on the other foot, if Nigerians, for example, now, would they accept a Christian ticket? And then you have in the leading party. But then there are other options. The PDP is there, the Labour Party is there, the NNPP is there. So if you look at it, but are Nigerians informed enough to do that? to this moment? This is the question, Abdulaziz, we should be asking. And this is why perhaps most of the parties, they have to do a lot of homework to educate their supporters and their followers.
Well, yeah, actually, I agree with you that we need a lot of voter education, citizens mobilization, and engagement. Well, it's been Daybreak on Trust TV, and we've been reviewing the newspapers, today's papers, with the Deputy President of the Nigerian Guild of Editors, Ali M. Ali. We'll take a short break, and the show continues when we come back.
To every politician, as the campaigns gain momentum and passions begin to rise, remember, the errors of your opponents do not make you a success. Do not run down your opponent and inflame passions to violence between and among your supporters. What counts is what you plan to do for the electorate and how you intend to relieve their sufferings and bring succor. Nigeria is in dire need of patriotic leaders at all levels, leaders who will make national development their priority. Concentrate on telling the electorate what you intend to do when you get into office. Focus on making your vision clear to the electorate. Don't engage in verbal abuses, fake news, or speeches. Keep dealing with issues that will bring progress. You win the hearts and minds of the people by being above board, by being civil, patriotic, and showing empathy. Let's join hands to make the 2023 elections peaceful. A message from the National Orientation Agency.
With me today is the Governor of Kano State, His Excellency Dr. Umar Abdullahi Ganduji.
First of all, I have to congratulate you, the Media Trust, that has given birth to the Daily Trust, and now the Media Trust is giving another birth to Trust TV.
My guest today is the Executive Governor of Plateau State, His Excellency Simon Bako Lalong.
Thank you very much, and also opportunity, and I congratulate you for introducing the television because Daily Trust has always been my people.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency.
Thank you. But in a situation where you find that they look at the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
because I have said that.
Welcome back. You are still tuned to Trust TV from Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, and the program is Daybreak. And we've been reviewing today's newspapers with our guest in the studio, Deputy President of the Nigerian Guild of Editors, Ali M. Ali. We continue the review with today's edition of This Day newspaper. And let me quickly go through the front page. The main story says, Wike's camp insists Ayu's ouster irreducible condition for peace, demands to pick choice of successor, urges Mark to speak up since his chairman's resignation letter. His with chairman's resignation letter. Atiku points gloomy picture of Nigeria, describes current statistics as grim, disappointing. PDP group dismisses Tinubu's presidency as Buhari's third term. And on top of the page, NNPC limited debt to FG states hits 1.055 trillion in 6 months. Pipeline security maintenance gulp 8.35 billion in 1 month. Saudi Aramco's revenue surge 90%, climb to 48.4 billion in Q2. And below that, FG $400 million required to complete abandoned tower, Millennium Tower. story on page 10 of today's This Day. And just below their masthead, Peter Said, first year of Nigeria's next president may be about blood, sweat, tears. Story on page 50. Police launch grand offensive against criminals nationwide. Orders tight security around schools, hospitals, public infrastructure. NAF fighter jets hit terrorist enclave in Niger. So these are some of the stories in today's This Day newspaper. Well, since we'll be discussing later in the next hour with Mala Ali about politics, maybe we'll take a break from this story on Wiki and the ongoing fight in the PDP. Let's look at this story of NNPC, owing the federal government. Particularly, I'm interested in this saying pipeline security and maintenance GOP 8.35 billion in 1 month. If you juxtapose this with the hemorrhaging case rise in oil theft, how do you reconcile these two? Spending 8.35 billion in just a month to secure the pipelines, and also the fact that, as we mentioned earlier in the program, the NNPC and oil industry regulators are talking about how much we are losing to oil theft.
Well, all of this underscores the porosity of our security system, how weak the Nigerian state is when it comes to security matters. If you look at who are those saddled with pipeline security maintenance, apart from those who are statutorily responsible, like, for example, the NSDC, that is Nigeria Civil Defense, they're partly responsible for protecting. But then, let me take you a little back to history. When the government of late President Umaru Musa Yar'Adua struck the armistice with Niger Delta militants, leading to the establishment of the Military of Niger Delta Affairs. Some of the repentant militants were actually given the contract for pipeline security. So now if you scrutinize this humongous amount of money, 8.5, you say, billion?
Yeah, 8.5 billion naira.
Every month. That is too humongous. It's just like some people argue the subsidy scam, because it has turned out to be a scam now, given the humongous amount of money appropriated for subsidy for fuel not supplied or for fuel not consumed, which has been laid bare in the past when the House of Reps committee set up an ad hoc committee to probe that in the, I think, the 7th Assembly or thereabout. Remember in the week, the chairman of the ad hoc committee himself was caught in the snare of the labyrinthine corruption that underlays the whole process. So now, if you look at this humongous 8.5 billion and couple with the fact that the NNPC or even the newly unveiled limited liability company is remitting zero to the federal allocation, zero remittance, then you know that somewhere in the Nigerian state is even a lot weaker than we thought. Because if the state cannot police at this horrendous amount of money and then cannot check oil theft, and in any case, this oil theft, some of us have this strong suspicion, is not done in isolation. There are some people who are, just like they divert resources, they divert revenue accruable to the federal government. And even the TSA has not checked that. Well, yes. So you said that the Nigerians, it's showing that the Nigerian state is weaker than we thought. Or some people highly placed are part and parcel of this sleazed and this wanton, if you like, destruction of national assets.
Okay, let's quickly take a look at this story that talks about, police launching grand offensive against criminals nationwide. And, with the recent, airstrikes, by NAF in the enclaves of the terrorists, do we see an end to the insecurity soon, or? this is just for the papers?
Well, it took a while before we got to this. This thing has festered for years, maybe years and years. Not today, not last year, not even 10 years ago. Because of the nature of, first, the Nigerian state, over time. The Nigerian state, unfortunately, over time, has not really done the needful. What I mean the needful, give the enabling environment for individuals to flourish and realize their full potentials. And that's why we're having crime, the upsurge of crime. And then the coming of the glamorous, if you like, life of politicians. Politicians, only yesterday, some of them were, if you look at it, mere paupers. Paupers, totally, literally. They go, and I'm not saying even at the federal level, at the local level. Instances of where a councillor who had not, I remember in 1999, someone who had not, a councillor representing his village somewhere, for the first time he had this humongous amount of money. And he literally went insane. It's there in 1999, it happened. I don't want to mention the state or the name, but it happened because he's never seen so much money. Now, 22 years later, you see the life, the flashy life, the grand life of politicians. That is not something. And then coupled with the fact that no punishment. You see people, convicted felons, given state pardon, and some of them are shameless enough to want to make a run for political office. So all this crime, yes, we may end the siege on the Nigerian state, but I don't see, unless the Nigerian state rethink and then give the enabling environment. Okay, for example, now how do you explain we have young people at home for upwards of 6-7 months doing nothing? They are not equipped to deal with life. They are still undergoing because of ASU strike, for example, partly. So we may end having sleeper cells of criminals in the forests, in the bushes. But how do you deal with the stark economic and then income inequality? Because of the Nigerian state, the environment is not enabling enough for people to flourish, to realize their individual potentials. Some people don't really want to go get PhDs. They just want to earn a living.
All right. Thank you so much for this in-depth analysis on the papers this morning, Ali M. Ali. But we have to actually wrap up here. But we still have you, for the next hour. So you have to sit tight. All right. So with this, we'll come to the end of this hour on Trust TV. We'll take a quick break. And when we return at the top of the hour, we'll continue with the show. Do stick around.
But in a situation where you